is a new edition of our CLARIN Café series. CLARIN Cafés, for those who are new, are online events that we organize within the CLARIN infrastructure to discuss about topics that are of relevance for our infrastructure, for our network. And today it is definitely one of those with the title Online and Desktop Tools for Querying a Language Corpus, something that we've all done before. It is co-organized organized by Martin Wynne, Senior Researcher in Corpus Linguistics and National Coordinator of CLARIN UK. And I am going to be your host with just a short introduction to CLARIN related things on behalf of the CLARIN Board of Directors. David, who has been taking care of the technical support, is the mastermind behind the CLARIN Cafés. And I remind you that this is a recorded event. If you don't want to be recorded, you can switch off your camera and use the chat to ask questions or make comments. In any case, there will be a moment of discussion also at the end of the presentations. So I will just give you a very, very short introduction to CLARIN, and then I will hand over to Martin, who will talk about his own work in surveying tools for corpus analysis. And I will also explain a little bit in which context the survey has taken place. And then we will follow with the three main presentation with the three main tools. The Lanxbox presented by Vaclav Brezina from the Lancaster University. AntConc presented by Laurence Anthony from Waseda University in Japan. And after a very short break, KonText presented by Michal Kren from Charles University. And as I anticipated, there will be a short discussion panel where we'll try to see what the next steps could be in making these corpus tools more easily findable and connected. So a very quick 101 into CLARIN. For those who know about CLARIN, you can use this time to make your coffee. So CLARIN stands for Common Language Resources and Technology Infrastructure. It is a legal entity and it was established in 2012. And the ESFRI, the European Scientific Forum for Research Infrastructures, has recognized CLARIN as a landmark, so this is to say, an established infrastructure that is able to provide services to researchers throughout Europe. And what do? We do is providing easy and sustainable access for scholars in the humanities and social sciences and beyond to digital language data in written, spoken, or multimodal form, advanced tools to discover, explore, exploit, annotate, analyze, combine them wherever they are located. And doing this possibly when the resources and tools are not completely open via a system of single sign-on that enables you to access these tools and resources with your institutional identifiers. So in a very simple way. It is also an ecosystem for knowledge sharing and training, and in a way, this is what we're doing here today. And more recently, it has been collaborating with other European research infrastructures in the construction of this new thing, the EOSC, the European Open Science Cloud. And in particular, together with the other humanities infrastructures in Europe, we constitute the SSH cluster, one of the 5 disciplinary clusters of the EOSC. This is CLARIN today, a distributed network of over 70 centers with 22 full members. 2 observers, but one observer, UK, is a very special one, not just because it co-organizes today's event, but because it is an observer also for reasons that go beyond the powers that we have, in the sense that it's also for Brexit reasons that this status of special observership is maintained. So we're very happy that UK is with us. And then there's a third-party organization also in the United States and an observer in South African observer as well. At the core of CLARIN, there is the technical infrastructure, which is in a way ensuring the verification of language resources throughout our network, so to make them findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. CLARIN centers are where data and services are stored and maintained, but with a harmonized set of metadata, it is possible to access them centrally. So the metadata for resources are visible in the Virtual Language Observatory, where you can search for metadata without knowing which centers or host the data that you're interested in. And then the Language Resources Switchboard enables you to find tools and services that can process specific types of data. You can try out these tools, and we also are developing training materials to let you learn how to use them. And indeed, we are also operating as a knowledge infrastructure. So I mentioned training, so we are developing a training platform, Teach with CLARIN. We also have a network of knowledge centers, and I particularly insist on this because we have here today one of our speakers that is from one of the CLARIN knowledge centers, Michal Kren, the Czech Corpus. And you can address these knowledge centers for requests, for expertise, etc. We organized an annual conference that is going to take place very soon. Then there's various channels where you can find more about CLARIN, for instance, the tour, the CLARIN publications, our collection of video channels of videos from previous events, the best practices papers, also linked to the knowledge centers. And then there's a funding hub, funding and support, that enables you to find out various actions that are directed towards researchers, both for developing new resources and also for networking. In particular, another important initiative that is that CLARIN launched is the resource families. What are they? They are user-friendly overviews per data type of the available language resources in CLARIN. You can see at the link what they look like. There's so far 13 families of corpora, 5 of lexical resources, and 4 tools. And they list the most important metadata and a brief description, as well as links. And indeed, and Martin will tell you more about this, there are also small projects dedicated to extending the scope of this initiative, and in particular to create new resource families. And this workshop is embedded in one of these mini projects that is dedicated to the topic of today's cafe. So without much further ado, I am handing over the microphone to our host today, to our organizer today, sorry, and let's enjoy our cafe.
Hello, everybody. I'm Martin Wynne. I'm just going to organise sharing my screen with you so I can show you my slides. So I'm a senior researcher in corpus linguistics at the University of Oxford, where I'm based in the Faculty of Linguistics, Philology and Phonetics, and my main job is managing the Oxford Text Archive collections. Just a quick word about that. We've been collecting corpora and digital data of various sorts here since 1976. And in the latest phase of development, we're building a repository that's part of the Infrastructure for Digital Arts and Humanities, IDA programme, funded by the Arts and Humanities Research Council in the UK. There's a link here on the slide to a blog all about that general initiative. And a quick screenshot there of our new version of the repository, which is the new home for the Oxford Text Archive collections, which is up and running now. You can see the URL there. And we're actively collecting corpora and other digital data sets This also functions as the CLARIN repository for the UK, so it's part of the national and European infrastructure. I'm also the national coordinator for CLARIN in the UK, as Francesca's already mentioned, and the work that I'm reporting on today has been funded directly by CLARIN as part of the CLARIN Resource Families programme. So you've heard a little bit about this already. Here's a list of, I think, all of the resource family guides that have been published so far. And the one that I'm focusing on today, or in fact, it will be two guides on closely related topics. You can see in the bottom right corner there, which are the online and desktop Corpus tools. So along with my colleague here in Oxford, Joanna Szedlaska, who I believe is with us, and with help and support from the CLARIN community, we've been gathering information about tools for text and corpus analysis. So we're making a list of all the software applications that are available for corpus analysis, with some information about them to help users to find them and to choose which ones to use. So how do we define a corpus analysis tool, you might ask? Well, I decided to rely on the view of the late John Sinclair and the view of many others, that the basic operations of corpus linguistics involve corpus, concordance, collocation. So we're including tools that can at least deal with the corpus and show concordances, and ideally also calculate collocations. Usually they can do much more, but we're considering the others the icing on the cake and not the essential criteria for inclusion here. As you'll see as we go on, some of the tools that will be presented in this cafe can do some very fancy things indeed, a lot beyond these basics. But what is not in scope for this are tools which are only for things like building corpora, for annotation, for more complex forms of analysis and visualization. Many of the tools that are included can do these things, but they need to pass the basic threshold of having the basic functions of corpus analysis, being able to do concordances. So if the tool only does word clouds and not concordances, then it's not included. If it does both word clouds and concordances, then it is included. If it only does part of speech tagging or parsing or topic modeling or stylometric analysis, it's not included. I hope you get the idea. The reason for excluding tools that don't do concordances and have other functionality is not that I don't like them or that they're not important. It's simply a matter of restricting the boundaries of this project to a manageable scale and not trying to do everything at once. These other categories are in some cases already or likely to be the topic of further separate CLARIN resource families. You might think it's desperately old-fashioned to privilege concordances in this way, and perhaps the idea of corpus analysis has moved on from that. And that would be a good topic for discussion. Please feel free to state your opinions, and you can put questions and points in the chat, and we can pick them up in the panel session. So we'd all be very interested to hear from you. Another thing to mention is that the majority of the things that we've found so far have been applications for working with text, but those that work with speech and can do corpus analysis with audio and video streams are definitely in scope, although they seem to be much rarer. But one of the reasons for this is to reach out and find out more information from more people, and if people can volunteer more about tools for working with audio, that would be very welcome. And if we find it's an area that needs a lot more attention, it could be the focus of a further separate effort. So where are we at now? Well, we've got a first draft spreadsheet of tools with information in a wide range of categories. At this stage, we want to do a bit of crowdsourcing to show you the list and the basic information that we have. This basic information, like where do you find it? Is it free? Is it for use online or offline? Does it work on different platforms? What sorts of data can you apply it to? What are the license conditions? How do you cite it, etc.? So I'm inviting the participants here and others to contribute to this by pointing out errors and gaps and making suggestions. You can follow that link, which I will put in the chat as well. And we'll try and make as widely available as possible. In order to kind of manage this and have some editorial control over it, if you could add things as comments, and then we'll look at them and include them as fit. Please notice there are two sheets in that single document, one for desktop tools and one for online tools. We've got different categories for describing them, so they're in two separate sheets. It will be open in this way for the next 2 weeks to the end of September, and then we'll make a version for publication as a CLARIN resource family. That's not the end of the process, because the CLARIN resource families are continually curated. The information is monitored and updated, and at any time you can contact us to suggest additions and corrections. This stage is really to get it in a good enough state for publication, but we want to continue to make it a live activity, because these sorts of registries of information about software are notoriously out of date. We've made use of a number of existing ones which have been very useful, ones that have been made in the past, but typically that less than 50% of the information in them is accurate, because they just simply haven't been maintained. There's been time available for a particular project at a particular time to gather the information, but not for the ongoing curation. What we're hoping is that by being embedded in an infrastructure in CLARIN with a long-term perspective and the backing of national infrastructures and funders, we can have a better chance of long-term sustainability for efforts like this. So as I mentioned, there are separate sheets for desktop and online corpora. This is just a quick screenshot of the online one. With the online corpora, we decided to make an entry for each deployment of it rather than for each different application. So for something widely used like CQP Web, there's an entry for the Lancaster one and for ones hosted in other places, because they're there with different corpora. The same goes for things like No Sketch Engine and Corp, which are deployed in a number of different centres, because we thought this would be more useful for users looking for places to go to access and analyse different corpora. Just taking a step back to think about what we're trying to achieve here, why are we doing this? The overall aim is to help support the research process by helping users with resource discovery and selection, to help them find things and choose which one to use, but also to promote the sustainability of these tools and to promote interoperability between them and with different data sets. So for creators of tools, CLARIN can offer advice on licensing, support for the integration of tools into CLARIN centres and into services like the Federated Content Search and the Language Resources Switchboard. The Federated Content Search is a CLARIN service which allows you to insert a query which is sent off to different online interfaces. And we're keen to get more of these online tools integrated in that. So one of the goals for this is to find things, people and centres that we can contact and talk to them about integrating them and joining things together. And one of the reasons why we wanted to have a cafe like this, an online meeting, is that I think it's the case that different communities of practice tend to emerge and grow around a particular tool, which is a very good way for things to work and to develop research communities. But there are also things to be gained from encouraging communication between the communities, and that's one of the things that we're trying to do today. I should also just make it clear that CLARIN isn't trying to take credit for all the things that are in this list, and the inclusion in the spreadsheet doesn't mean that they become CLARIN tools. While the CLARIN centres do host some of the online tools, the role of CLARIN as an infrastructure is to help support the tools made by a wide variety of projects and people in the wider community, which have been funded and are branded in a variety of ways. So CLARIN helps users to find and use them and helps creators to sustain them, and it's trying to make it easier to connect things together and to connect them to different data sets. So there are some things which are in some sense CLARIN tools. There's a few of them mentioned here, although I think in all of these cases the other projects take at least partial credit for some of these, and I think Michal will explain that in the context of a particular tool later. But these things are in, so some of these online tools do some of the cool stuff that I mentioned earlier, like this is Diacolo, which does word clouds of collocation over time. But it's in scope because it also does concordances. If you click on one of the words that you find interesting there in the word cloud, it takes you to a concordance. And from there, you can go on to see the full text, in this case, an image as well, and do a close reading as well to investigate the context, co-text, and meaning of the interesting examples that are thrown up. Now, I mention this because you'll know that all these tools have slightly differing functionality, a different set of functions, and do things in slightly different ways. And we're also trying to, as well as the categories you've already seen in the spreadsheet, we are trying to itemize the functionality of each tool, although that isn't in the stripped down version that we're sharing with you, as it's a bit big and unmanageable. But if you can point us in the direction of the tools that we need to look at, we'll do the analysis and breakdown in terms of the functionality. But we hope that eventually we can allow users to see exactly which functions each tool offers. So these are the basic categories we've got now that we're at least for the desktop tools that we're asking you to look at and help us to add information. I'd like to draw attention just to one of them, as I'm running out of time here, but I think citation is particularly important, and it's an area in which I think people who use software can often do more to give credit to the developers by citing them properly, and the people who create software and make it available can do more to help users to know how to cite them, and this helps to promote the kind of ecosystem we want, where more credit can be given to developers, and the research process can be more transparent and more easily replicated. And I think it's an area where practice can improve, and I hope this can, by having this as a category and trying to gather and make available citation information, that we can encourage that. So in summary, what we're trying to do here, the questions that we're trying to answer are, at least for users, how do I choose which application to use for corpus analysis? For the people that make these tools, as for software engineers, how do I make it easier for users to find and use my software? And for us in CLARIN as infrastructure builders, we're thinking about how do we make tools easier to deploy, more sustainable, and more able to interoperate with different data sets and tools. And in order to do that, we need to know what's out there, what people are using, what questions they're trying to answer. And so we're gathering information to help answer all of these questions. So as I've said, please get involved, contribute to the spreadsheet, add comments to help us. If you spot gaps, see inaccuracies and missing information, sorry the URL's missing off there, but it's on the it's in the chat and the other and then the other slides, and we'll share an updated version of this which does have the link to the spreadsheet in it. Tell us what more we can do to help answer these questions above, and tell us what other questions we should be answering. So please get in touch by contributing to the spreadsheet. You can contact Francesca and me directly. Our emails are there. You should take a look and see who your national contacts are if you don't already know in your country. There's always a general contact for CLARIN as well. So just finally to say, if you have software that's not in the list, please don't be offended if you've been overlooked or misrepresented in there. This is a work in progress, and if you tell us, we'll put it right. And thank you for your time. We're now ready, I believe, to go on to the next speaker. So thank you. Yes, so yeah, with great pleasure, I introduce Vaclav Brezina from Lancaster, who's going to talk to us about LancsBox. We can see your slides now, Vaclav, so please take it away.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Martin and Francesca, for the kind invitation. And in the next 20 minutes, I would like to talk about the most up-to-date version of Langsbox and the innovations that we've put into the Langsbox over the years as well. So Langsbox, a new generation software package for the analysis of language data and corpora. The question that we were asked, and I'm sort of responding in my presentation to, is what would be sort of the single selling point of the package that you are presenting to help people make sure that their research data is appropriate for this particular package. Langsbox is a very comprehensive package that allows users to carry out different types of analysis, simple concordances, as well as fairly complex statistical analyses. But the single word that I would associate with Langsbox from my perspective is innovation and pushing the boundaries, offering new perspectives and new tools that are not available elsewhere. So I think the general idea behind Langsbox is to reflect the state of the art in the field of corpus linguistics, and also imagine where corpus linguistics is going to be in 2-5 years' time, and respond actively to this. We know that corpus linguistics nowadays is much more popular than ever before, much more interdisciplinary than ever before, but it also brings certain challenges, the complexity and sophistication of the analyses that are required, for instance, and the challenges to the individual corpus linguist, the user who is starting with corpus analysis in particular, how to orient themselves in the vast range of tools and methods that are available nowadays. So I think in response to that, Langsbox is trying to see how we can analyze multidimensional data, because one thing to realize in corpus linguistics is that we are dealing with data across speech and writing, formal, informal contexts, different types of speakers, young and old, male, female, historical data, present day data, different genres, registers, L1 and L2 production, and so on and so forth. So we have a lot of variables, a lot of metadata, and Langsbox in its latest iteration tries to respond to this type of wealth of data, which is really exciting, but it can be overwhelming if we don't have the right type of tools to analyze this type of data. So as I said, the key word for my presentation is innovation in corpus linguistics, and I will be giving you some highlights and examples of how we work with this notion and how we implement it in the tool that users can download for free and then use across different operating systems. So Langsbox is a desktop tool that allows you to run different types of analysis with language data with corpora.
What is Langsbox? Langsbox is a free software tool developed at Lancaster University to analyse and visualise language. The tool is user-friendly and can be used by researchers, students and teachers in a wide variety of disciplines, including linguistics, education, history, sociology, psychology and many others. Here's how the tool works. You can load your own data in any format or use data that comes with the tool. The tool searches the data, which we call corpora, produces graphs, and performs statistical analyses. For example, imagine you want to find how many times the word Sherlock appears in the works of Arthur Conan Doyle. You can simply use the corpus of collected works available in Langsbox and type the word Sherlock into the search box. The number you'll get is 388, with 33 instances of the name Sherlock appearing in the story of The Hound of the Baskervilles. Similarly, you can see that the phrase "elementary, my dear Watson," now attributed to the famous fictional detective, does not appear in the corpus at all. With Langsbox, you can search, analyse and visualise very large amounts of language. So, Why don't you try it yourself?
Indeed, and this is a question to our users, and this was an intro video that sort of tries to capture the gist of the tool and what we want to achieve there. So currently, there's a version of Langsbox, version 6, that is a package filled with features, smart searches, wizard, automatic corpus building, and many, many others, in addition to the standard features as Martin highlighted in his talk. We are now transitioning into a new version of Langsbox that we want to promote further, and I will be giving you some of the highlights for that version. Langsbox X, standing for XML, that is able to handle very large corpora, very complex corpora in terms of the metadata, with a brand new UI that is much more intuitive, much more 2022 in terms of the visual appear, and much more sort of sophisticated in its simplicity. So one of the things that we also do as part of this development cycle is to train researchers across different disciplines. And next week we are running the first week of our 8-week training course, Corpus Linguistics Method, Analysis and Interpretation, and Langsbox is an essential part of this training. So far we've trained over 70,000 different researchers, early career and more senior as well. The reason why I'm mentioning this is that this is an important part of the feedback cycle that we receive, and we are really open to any type of feedback. So if you have any thoughts or any questions, we are very happy to get into the conversation with you. And this feedback cycle is essential for the innovations that we present to our users. We take user feedback seriously. We have a development team, not only dealing with some of the traditional bug fixes, but also thinking and imagining what the best responses to the user feedback would be, but also thinking beyond the user feedback and offering something that the users probably have not seen before. You can download Langsbox very easily, both the version 6, but also the new version that is currently available only as a concordance, but coming up this year as a sort of full package, Langsbox X. We started back in 2015, and Langsbox was a very simple tool, originally designed for the analysis of collocations and visualization of collocations. But as we progressed through the years, we've developed a fairly complex standalone tool that can take data in any format and process it, annotate it internally, and then analyze it statistically and produce fairly complex types of analyses. And as I mentioned already, version X, dealing with XML, brand new UI, and I will be focusing on some of the innovations in this area. So here are some Langsbox highlights for you. Smart searching already available in version 6, but extended much more in the X version. Smart searching is a simple idea that this is a powerful search box where you can type in a grammatical structure or a semantic category in version X, such as passives or connector, modal, past tense, nominalization, and so on. And Langsbox has a predefined set of features that you can also adapt and add to, and will automatically search for these. So especially for beginner users or classroom users, this is a feature that is very powerful. You can combine these smart searches, so you can have a proper noun, verb, plus adverb, and you get a fairly complex syntactic structure out of the tool very, very easily, even if you don't know the underlying part of speech tagging. Obviously, Langsbox, as any serious tool, uses the CQL to give users the full power to define searches of any level of complexity. You can see that these are some of the examples of the CQL, obviously depending on the annotation that is available for the individual corpus that you load into Langsbox. Langsbox also has a syntax highlighting for CQL, so it is much easier for the users to identify whether relevant pieces of information need to appear. Obviously, this is something that is more relevant to the advanced users than the beginner users, but this is the underlying language that Langsbox works with. The new UI, and this is what I would like to show you in a preview, because this is something that is currently not available, but will be available in its complexity fairly soon. Langsbox allows you to have as many tools and as many analyses open as possible. You can always maximize them. Here's a concordance where you can do the standard things and much more. You can search, sort and filter the data. These are the sort of basic operations that we have. You can see that the UI is very intuitive, no drop-down menus, but everything is at your fingertips. You can get the sort of much larger context there. What you'll see here is the graph call tool, that tool for collocations and graphical visualization of collocations that compute all the relevant association measures at once, and you can also get the context and examples of concordances straight from the tool. We have also a tool for words and keywords. You can select the tools very easily, add them very easily, drag them around, maximize, minimize, close them as you like. So the workspace is a really flexible workspace. It also allows you to summarize the data using a very powerful cross-tabulation summary tables. If you are interested in frequencies per genre, for instance, here I've maximized this, and you can see that, you get data based on the 100 million words British National Corpus very, very easily, according to the genres, if you are interested in that as part of your research question. Third feature of Langsbox X that I would like to highlight is the size of the corpora I can deal with. Here is an example of the Hansard corpus, and I just sort of highlighted the 2B, the 2 billion words of the data, which is a fairly sizable corpus for a desktop tool. Normally these the size of data will be handled by a server rather than by a desktop tool, but with the Langsbox technology we can handle this data fairly easily. I just would like to see show you the responsiveness of the tool dealing with this type of data. These are videos that are in real time, so they are not edited, so you can actually see how that works on a regular travel laptop, if you like. So here are searches for vaccination, and here's the summary table based on the 2 billion word Hansard corpus, where we are looking at different forms that are related to vaccination when we search for vaccine and asterisk, and look at the parliamentary debate in the UK context. We know in how many texts something occurs. We cross-tabulate across different annotation categories, part of speech, semantic tags, because the corpus is fully tagged as well. We can also look at the genre summaries, and if we want to know whether this is coming from the House of Commons, House of Lords, and where does it come from, written statements or spoken statements, and so on and so forth. This can be done very, very easily. You always see the size of the corpus, the absolute frequencies, relative frequencies, the range, number of texts this appears in. So you have all the information that you need at your fingertips, and very, very efficiently. This again, working with 2 billion words and searching for vaccine as our topic, and searching 2 billion words for collocations related to vaccination. So you can see in real time how responsive Langsbox X is with this. What it does is it searches the data. It automatically computes using R scripts, so external R scripts that you can modify all association measures. You can add your own if you are not happy with the range that we offer, and it automatically creates a graph that you can also modify depending on different attributes you want to assign to the edges and different values. So this is very flexible, and you can also get the concordances to interpret the data very, very easily. So this is how LanguageBox works with 2 billion words of data, and that can be probably extended even further, because the response times are really very encouraging. One last thing I would like to talk about, just to demonstrate the keyword that I've been repeating throughout my presentation, that is the keyword of innovation, thinking outside of the box, or outside of LanguageBox, if you like, in this case. This is a feature that will also migrate over to LanguageBox X, and a feature that we are incredibly proud of, a feature that we call the wizard tool, and currently fully available in version 6, where you select your data, your corpora, as many as you like, your own data or the data that we provide with LanguageBox for British, American, English, Chinese, and other languages. You select the tools that you want to use to, in response to your research questions. What tools would be most appropriate in the context: concordances, collocations, anagrams, word lists, and so on and so forth. If you have a particular set of search terms that you want to explore, you can have as many and as complex search terms as you like. You can even load them from a file. If you have a simple text file, 1 search term per line, and then you just sort of specify where you want to save the results. You hit run, make a cup of coffee. Depending on the complexity of the analysis, this might take some time, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, depending on the size of the data and the complexity of the analysis. But the result is a full research report in Microsoft Word document, fully editable. So you can have a look at it. It's structured as a full research report. And what I'm showing you here is completely automated. So I haven't edited this research report at all. This has been created by LanguageBox automatically. So it starts with an introduction, method, split into data and procedure, where it highlights the data in tables, but also describes the tables, what's inside of the tables, and summarizes the tables in an intelligent fashion. It displays the results again, labels the tables, comments on the tables, highlights the most important results in the table, displays graphs, but also describes the graphs, something that might be fairly complex in this particular case to see for a human eye. The tool obviously knows what the shared collocates are here in this particular graph, and it lists them and provides a link to the full data set for further reference if needed. It also provides statistical analysis, chooses the most appropriate statistical tests for the shape of data that you have, and also some visualization in this particular case, the error bars, 95% confidence intervals, and again, the t-test to compare to groups of data, just to confirm the type of analysis and provide some sort of interpretation and conclusion based on the statistical analysis. So a bit of a sort of an exaggeration, but all you need to write is a literature review and a discussion, and you can send it off. But obviously, there's more editing to be done, and depending on your research question, how you focus there. But I think the Corpus tools can go further than traditionally they did, and this is something that we are trying to explore when pushing the boundaries with LanguageBox. Obviously, you get the full data behind this, so you have full accountability of the process as well, so you can revisit any of the steps of the analysis behind the research report. So just to summarize, I think the advantages of this approach that we've taken here at Lancaster University is that it allows the researchers to have more time for exploration. If the tools take on the heavy lifting for us, we will have more time for the linguistic analysis, more time for multiple perspectives, more time for collaboration, and more time for things that matter. So Langbox tries to facilitate this process by going as far as we can go currently with automation, provide a simple user interface without too many or actually any drop-down menus, and allow users to have all the information at their fingertips. So thank you so much. I think I've run out of my time.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Vaclav. That was excellent. Obviously, what we wanted the presenters to do was to give us, show us some excellent examples of the types of tools that are included here. With the widely used ones such as Lanxbox and AntConc that we'll see, we're fairly confident we've got some fairly accurate information already in our spreadsheet. Although, having said that, Laurence has already pointed out a couple of errors for me this morning. It gives me great pleasure to introduce Laurence Anthony, who's going to be talking to us about AntConc. I'm particularly pleased that he could join us because he's made great efforts to be here virtually after a very long journey, after giving a keynote speech at the American Association for Corpus Linguistics conference a few days ago. Thank you very much for joining us, Laurence, and please take it away.
You should be able to see me and my video. Can you see my face now? And you should also be able to see my slides. I'm going to be following on to explain about AntConc, which is another comprehensive toolkit for concordancing and text analysis. So just a second. So I'm just going to start off with a little bit of history to tell you, why it was developed and how it's evolved. Then I'll go through basically the design concept, the reasons why I think this is a useful tool to use, and then talk about the tools and features. And if we have time, I'll give you a quick live demonstration of AntConc. Okay, so some of the history of AntConc. Okay, so AntConc is just one of many of the software tools I develop. I've got 17 AntLab freeware language processing tools on my website. Martin's has explained that he's only including tools that have this concordancing and collocation tool included. So if you look at my website, you'll see a lot of other tools that have dedicated features, dedicated functionality. For example, I've got these data collection tools like AntConc that will create a corpus of scientific research papers divided up into introductions, methods, results, and so on, file converter and FireRAN for social media data collection analysis, and so on. I've also got some data cleaning tools like Encodant and Sarant and Segmentant, and then some data annotation tools, for example, a front end to the clause tagger that Lancaster builds called ClauseAnt. I've got a general purpose tagging tool based on Spacey called TagAnt. But of course, these are beyond the scope of today's talks. And I also have these data analysis tools. And the main one we're going to be looking at today then is AntConc, which is probably the most famous tool that I've developed and the one that a lot of people will be using. Okay, so AntConc has 4 major releases. The first release was version 1.0. It was released in 2002. So this is actually the 20th anniversary of AntConc this year, which is kind of nice. As you can see, version 1 was a very simple concordancing tool for Windows and Linux. So interestingly, I built it originally for Linux and then moved it across to Windows, writing it in Perl and TK. And then version 2 became similar to how it is now in some sense. And you can see here that it's got a concordance tool, a dispersion plot tool, clusters, n-grams, file, word, and keyword tools. But it was still built in Perl with TK and designed primarily for Windows and Linux. When I went to, and that was built just a couple of years after the first version was released. Then version 3 has been the version that probably most people are familiar with. It's been around about 10 years or so. And it's built for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS. It's native for these different operating systems in the sense that it looks native. I should say it has a native look to it. It's built with Perl and with TKX, and TKX has a way to access the operating system's graphic libraries, which allows it to create a native looking interface. So this has almost all the tools that we have in the latest version, so concordancing, plotting, file view, clusters, n-grams, collocates, word, and keyword tools. And I would say these are all the core tools that corpus linguists would generally use. They would go beyond these tools, but in terms of basic corpus analysis tools, I think this would cover most of them. And then very recently, in 2020, last year, in 2021, on Christmas Day, I released a version 4.0, and it's now been updated to 4.1. And this is now for Windows, Linux, and Mac OS, still native, but I rewrote the entire code in Python using Qt as the graphic interface. And it gives a much nicer, modern look to it. Very native looking on all operating systems. And you'll see that it has the same tools as before: concordance, plot, file, cluster, n-grams, collocates, word, keyword, but I've also recently added a new word cloud tool that interfaces to all the other tools, so you can get word clouds based on clusters or keywords or collocates if you want. Okay, so I didn't in Václav's presentation of Lanxbox, he didn't talk much about how many people are using the tools, but I thought this would be interesting in the case of AntConc because it has been used for so long. So back in 2012, Chris Tribble did a survey of 891 corpus users, well, corpus linguists, and asked them what their most which tool they use the most. And you can see the ranking was with Corpus BYU at the top, and then AntConc and Wordsmith tools coming after that, and then Sketch Engine and these other tools coming later. Lanxbox wasn't released at this time. But you can see Corpus BYU is a web-based tool, so AntConc and Wordsmith tools were the dominant desktop tools at the time. So this is a view of the AntConc downloads between 2004 and 2021. I don't have the data for 2022 right now. And just to give you a perspective, this is when the Chris Tribble survey was conducted, and AntConc had about 128,000 downloads in that year. And you can see there's been a steady increase up till 2018, which had a 727,000 downloads off my website. But of course, other people might be downloading these and giving the tools to other people as well. You might wonder why there was a drop off. I think it's due to big major releases coming out. So in 2018, I had 3.5.9 come out, and that causes a lot of people to go and start downloading it and seeing what the new version offers. At the bottom of the screen here, you'll see I have tracked where the downloads come from. I don't track people when they use AntConc, but I do see who downloads them, the tools, and you can see that it's used in over 140 countries. And I've got some YouTube tutorial videos, and those have been viewed over 500,000 times. So you get a feel of the scale of my user base there. Okay, so what is the design concept and what tools and features are included in AntConc? I want to talk about that now. The design concept of AntConc is, I suppose one keyword here would be transparency. I'll come back to that a little bit later, but you can see in the main interface when you're running some analysis, everything is in some sense transparent. You can see on the left here the files that you're analyzing. You can see at the top all the tools that are available to you as a user, the quick, plot, file, cluster, and so on. And then in the middle, you can see here the results of the analysis, and at the bottom is some controllers to do searching and so on. In terms of design, I actually could move all of these into different places, but people are very familiar with this interface design, so I don't really want to move it so much around into different positions, although it could technically be moved around. Okay, so in terms of strengths, I would say the first thing is that AntConc is easy to find, set up, and use. If you go online and just type AntConc, you'll immediately get to the website and you'll see a portable installer or a standard installer. You'll see help guides, YouTube tutorials, and so on. So it's really easy to find, set up, and use. It's also very safe and reliable in the sense that every version of my new tools now are digitally signed and notarized by Windows and Mac OS. So you don't ever have like security warnings and when you're trying to download or install any of these tools now. You just double click and load them. That takes a lot of work, I must say, but I'm very happy to say that that is now the case with all my software. So digitally signed and notarized by the big Windows and Mac OS companies, and there are no viruses in the software, of course, and we do get lots of community users, reporting if there are any errors or bugs and so on. So it does get updated quite frequently. This is another key design concept or a strength, is that it's managed by the designer of the tool. So the project leader, which is me, built the tool. So it gives, it means that whoever manages the tool has a deep insight to how the tool actually works. For example, how to fix bugs, how to identify errors, how to maybe even add new features. Because the tool is developed by the project leader, it gives the tool itself a lot of flexibility. And you can see that in the way it evolves over time as well, with new tools and new features and new documentation. I don't rely on funding to basically build AntConc. It's just me. Of course, I get feedback from many other people and comments and from some of the leading corpus linguists in the world, but it's still my project. And I think that is a strength of this tool. And then it's designed for a broad user base. So as I've just said, it's designed for Windows, Mac, and Linux. It's also designed for UTF-8 languages, so multilingual support. And initially I used it a lot with Japanese and Chinese. So it's a very solid tool for using with non-English language as well as English. And a new feature for AntConc 4 was the support for left to right, which is like English and Japanese, but also right to left languages like Arabic and Hebrew. This is a feature that I've wanted to add to AntConc for a very long time. So now I would say AntConc is one of the best general purpose corpus tools for analyzing Arabic, because of it's beautifully integrated with this right to left support, not only in terms of the results, but also in the interface itself. So that's a really nice feature. And you can see here, I've got the word cloud feature showing a result for English, and then underneath that you'll see an Arabic word cloud, and all the tools will work the same way. They are completely equivalent for English or Arabic or Japanese or Chinese. That's an important feature. It's also designed to be comprehensive, scalable, fast, and transparent. I'll go through these just briefly. So firstly, as I say, it does include all the standard corpus tools that people use, but it doesn't include some of the more niche tools that people use. In that sense, it's comprehensive. It also includes an online corpus repository. It has things like the AmnioSix and BO6 general English corpora built in, and other corpora like Bayes and Bohr are going to be coming added soon. I already have permission to include that. Because it uses a fully indexed single file SQLite database as a backend to all the corpora, it can process corpora of hundreds, thousands, millions, and billions of words. And these corpora can be loaded and saved and distributed very easily because they are just a single file SQLite database. And if anybody knows what a SQLite database is, they'll know that you can just literally copy it and paste it to another folder. You can just copy it and zip it and send it to somebody. And you can use a tool very quickly just to double click and open it and see all the tables and so on inside. Just a nice little example here. Quinn Domborowski recently wrote, I learned that my 20,000 novel megacorpus is almost 1.3 billion words, and the new AntConc can navigate it like a breeze. Quick for rare terms is near instantaneous. And that's somebody else using it, which I'm really happy to see. It also allows importing and exporting of the results as plain text files, using what we call an MTSV format that Anthony and Everett proposed back in 2019. And this comes back to this idea of transparency. So you've got the corpus itself is stored as a SQLite database, which is very transparent and very portable. When you want to export or load in results, you can also use this MTSV plain text format, so you can see very easily what's coming in and out. So full data interoperability is possible with AntConc 4. And just coming back to the example of Vaclav was just nicely showing one of the features of Lancsbox. And he showed how you can, when you load in a corpus, it will automatically tag the data. And when you want this wizard tool to work, it will choose the stat for you and write out the paper for you. So you can see that Lancsbox is doing a lot for you. And AntConc is kind of going the other way in the sense that I want to be more transparent about what's happening behind the scenes of the tool. So the user would have to tag their own data, and then they would load it in, and they would have to choose their own stat, and then generate the results, and they would then want output it and analyze it and so on. And we can perhaps discuss the pros and cons of those approaches. With AntConc, you've got to know which stat is going to be appropriate to use with the data, which could be a stumbling block for some people, but it does also mean that it's very transparent about what's actually happening. Okay, in terms of weaknesses, I would say this managed by the designer is also a weakness. It's a strength because I know the tool very, very well. But if I drop dead today or tomorrow, in some sense, AntConc could also drop dead. Being managed by a single person is a danger for corpus tools development. But on the other hand, it doesn't require funding. It doesn't require students. It doesn't require other people to build the tool that I want to build. And the history can say it's been around for 20 years. And Wordsmith Tools is similar, that it's built by Mike Scott, and that's been around 30, 40 years. So there are pros for this approach as well, but also some of the weaknesses. And because it is designed for a broad user base, it doesn't have these niche tools, it doesn't have niche statistics that some particular projects might want to use. So it's got general purpose corpus tools, it's got general purpose, the best practice stats, I would say, but it doesn't have niche tools and niche stats for a particular project. So I would say that more advanced corpus users should go beyond AntConc and start programming. Ideally, they would program themselves and develop some new tools and stats for their particular project. AntConc is also a kind of black box technology. It is freeware, but it's not open source. My user base aren't going to be probably going in and changing the code and adding features and so on. They would prefer somebody else to prepare what are the best practices, a software tool that it will work, it won't crash in the classroom, it won't crash when they're in the middle of their analyses. So something stable, and they're not going to contribute, generally speaking, to the development. So it's not open source now. And in some sense, it is inflexible because of that design. Users cannot easily add features and statistical models to the tool, although the modular design of the tool does allow me to add new features and tools if people suggest them or even contribute them on a one-to-one level. Okay, so I've got 5 minutes left. So let me just briefly show you the different tools and highlight some of the interesting features of each of them. So you can see here, this is the quick concordancer. You may see this and think, well, it's like every other concordancer ever made, but it actually has a very unique feature, which is this quick pattern sorting. So if you look at this search for process, you can see that the most salient word to the right, because it's sorted from to the right, is the word of. And if you can see the scroll bar here, it's right at the top of the results window, which means that AntConc has already found that process of is the most salient construction without having to scroll, without having to have the user scroll down and find that somewhere else in the results. Almost every concordancer that we have in the world sorts alphabetically, and which doesn't really have a lot of purpose. So I think AntConc is at the moment the only tool in the world that uses this idea of quick patterns. And of course, you can turn off the quick pattern functionality and just order by value, which means alphabetically if you want. It also has a plot tool, which is very, very important if you're interested in dispersion. So you can see not only the dispersion statistics, but you can also see a picture of where the hits appear in the files dispersed across, and you can also overlay different search results so you can see how two different searches, two different words are dispersed through the individual files of a corpus, which is a quite nice tool. And a very, very key tool for any corpus analysis is to see the text. So as you can see on the left, we have a list of the texts of the corpus. We can click on one of those and see it in its full form, and we can search within that and so on. And of course, if you click on one of these plot lines, it will take you to the file view to see that plot point in context. And similarly, if you click on one of these quick concordance lines, you'll also get taken to this file view. Okay, just to finish the other tools, it has a cluster tool, 2-word clusters, 3-word clusters, and so on. This is useful for lexical bundle analysis, where we fix the threshold for frequency and range. It also has an n-gram tool, which is also another variant of lexical bundles, in the sense that you can fix the size of the cluster, and then it will look for any 2-word or any 3-word or any 4-word, and so on, clusters in the corpus. And again, we can set the minimum threshold for frequency and range. Interestingly, the n-gram tool also can do this. So here we have a 4-gram. We can also set one of these slots to be an open slot. So you can see the something of the, this is an example of an open slot in the second position. If we scroll down here, you can see at 98, we have in the something that as a result, and you can click on this type or n-gram type and then see what words would fill in that slot. So in the case that, in the sense that, in the chapters that, in the fact that, and so on, and the frequencies as well. Okay, there's also a colloquy tool. I won't, as Martin was saying, it needs to have a colloquy tool in it to be counted in that survey. It also has a word list tool, and then finally a keyword list tool here. And I do have a very recent new tool added, which is the word cloud tool, added in version 4.1 of, and you can see here a word cloud for some data. Interestingly, this is one of the few word clouds available online or offline that will produce meaningful word clouds, in the sense that you can control exactly what words are being shown. If you want to apply a stop list, you can apply one or not. If you want to set the font sizes to be bigger or smaller, if you want the words to squeeze or not, you can set all of these values as you create your word cloud. So again, it has this transparency feature. You understand what it's doing when it creates it. And I think my time is up. So let me just finish with a quick summary. So AntConc 4 is a freeware multi-platform toolkit for doing data-driven language learning, introducing corpus methods, and carrying out basic corpus linguistics research. It runs on any computer, and it includes these core corpus tools. Because it uses a fully indexed SQLite database, it can store and process thousands, millions, and billion word corpora. And it also has an online repository for people to use. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laurence. That was an excellent whistle-stop tour of AntConc, and I'm sure was very much appreciated. I'm very pleased to be able to announce our next speaker. Our next speaker is going to be presenting an example of an online tool. According to the classification that we're operating with here, we've had two desktop tools that you download and run on your own desktop computer. Now we're going to shift the focus to an example of an online tool which you runs on a server and you access through the web. And for the purposes of this example, I'm very pleased to be able to introduce Michal Kren from Charles University in Prague, who's going to be talking to us about context. So please, we can see your screen, Michal, and your presentation. So please go ahead.
Thank you for the introduction. I'm going to introduce ConText, which is, as you said, online corpus query interface. I've prepared some short overview of the main difference between the desktop tools and online tools, at least as I can see it. But it seems to be rather outdated because what Laurence and Vaclav said changed my mind about what desktop tools are able to do. But still, I'm going to present this. So desktop tools are, as I understand, are tools designed for people to download, that are easy to use on their own computer, and typically also with their own data. So they are easy to install. There is almost no configuration, and they are easy to run and use. The limitations are, as I thought, especially on the size and also number of annotation layers or complexity of query language and all this stuff. Whereas the online tools are tools that are available on the internet. They are usually running somewhere already, and users just need to register, and typically there are pre-installed corpora, and it's not really easy sometimes to get your own data to the online tools. So it's just bit of take it or leave it. They require professional maintenance and installation. It's not really easy, you know, to install, say, KonText or no sketch engine and tools like that. But on the other hand, there's a powerful query language. They scale well to, say, tens of billions of tokens, and they are usually able to handle more rich annotations and more fine-grained distinctions, and etc. So the configuration is more tricky, but well, there's a trade-off in everything. So yeah, so that's the distinction as I see it. So in this respect, KonText is not a direct competitor of AntConc, because they are aimed at a different audience, so to say. Yeah. So what is KonText? It is open source, web-based concordancer that originated as a fork of no sketch engine. Why we did that? That was because we started to use no sketch engine at the Czech National Corpus, and we have seen room for improvement. Quite a lot of new features that we wanted to add to no sketch engine, but the problem was that although no sketch engine is open source, so you can do that. There's no problem. Also, licensing is open. There is no public repository where no sketch engine is developed, because the way it works is that there's a sketch engine. That's the full-fledged engine with the word sketches, with Corpus architect, and all this very useful stuff. And from time to time, there's no sketch engine package that's basically a subset of the sketch engine is taken away and published as an open source. So all the changes that you make to no sketch engine get overridden from in say a year. So so this is problematic, and we decided to start developing our own tool by finally rewriting the graphical user interface. So now the user interface is completely rewritten, and there's no common code, I would say, with no sketch engine. On the other hand, the backend is the same. So we are using Manatee Open, which means that we also share the query language. So the same CQL that you can use in sketch engine or no sketch engine is exactly the same CQL that you can use with KonText. So the main features of KonText are that it is developed openly on GitHub since 2014. It is developed by our programmers, Tomáš Machalek and Martin Zimandl. We try to keep in mind the needs of other centers. So whatever we do, we well, of course, the first think about new functionality. It's something that we would need, or we would try to make use of. But generally, the design is modular with lots of plugins and functionality that we think are somehow specific to Czech National Corpus, for instance, is designed as a plugin, so it's not necessary to use it really. It has KonText is deployed and tested not only at the Czech National Corpus but also at other CLARIN centers, most notably at Lindat in Prague as well, but also in Poland and Slovenia. CLARIN also can serve as an endpoint for federated content search, which is a meta search service hosted at the CLARIN Center, where users can put query and the FCS will then distribute the query across the centers, across the endpoints, and then collect the results and present it to the user. The canonical installation of KonText is running at corpus.cz/KonText, and that's the newest version that we are using. So to highlight the most notable user features that make distinguish KonText from other similar online tools. So first of all, I'd like to mention that there are only two query types: simple for beginners, so to say, and advanced for advanced users. Simple mode is like Google. You just write down a word or a phrase, and KonText makes search for you with some default settings that you may not be aware of, but it's still configurable. You can turn on or off, say, case distinction or regular expressions. Where the advanced mode is just full CQL with all the power of the CQL. Similarly to Lanxbox, the CQL editor features also syntax highlighting, which is very useful, and also basic validation of the values of attributes. So, for instance, if you start writing something like square brackets, attribute equals value, and all the stuff, then KonText will underline the attribute name if it doesn't exist and offer you other existing attributes. So we try to help the users to use CQL, especially those who are not familiar with programming and all this stuff. KonText also features Tag Builder. It is a widget and plugin as well that lets you interactively select the morphological categories, so that you don't need to know the exact text set. So how the morphological categories are encoded in the text set. You just click on it, select the part of speech and or other categories, and the tag builder will create the query for you. Another important feature is query history, because it offers not only there is a query history, but it's also can be filtered, overviewed easily. You can mark some of the queries that you've made as important for you, so that they won't disappear from the history. You can name such a query, and yeah, you can work with that and prepare your own inventory of SQL queries, or of queries in KonText. As regarding the working with the query result, KonText offers, well, filtering of concordances, sorting concordances. An important point is random shuffling that can be turned as a default also, where which means that after every query result will be randomly shuffled. This is important because quite often a corpora contain texts of different registers, genres, different kinds, and if you look for some very frequent phenomenon, it is quite likely that it will behave differently in text A, which is on the beginning, and completely differently in text that's somewhere else in the corpus. So random shuffling is quite important, I think. There are statistical functions like frequency distribution, etc. Also, there is a collocation analysis. The frequency distribution also can be displayed alternatively as frequency chart with confidence intervals. So it's not only tables, may not only be a table. And all these say operations that you are doing on the set of concordances, like filtering, sorting, frequency distribution, are really viewed as operate as a sequence of operations, and they are recorded as a sequence of operations. So when you are working with the corpus, you can see as the in the breadcrumb navigations that you have made 2-3 more operations with the query result, and this is editable. It is a processing chain that's editable. You can just edit the first step, and then rerun the rest of the processing chain if you find out that, say, your query was had just too high recall and too low precision or something like that. Each query, or rather the set of resulting set of concordances and all the setup, including the view, which attributes you want to see, etc., has a public permanent ID which is encoded into URL, which means that you can easily send the URL to your colleague and say, hey, I found something strange in this corpus. That's that's the result I've got. You don't have to explain, the exact steps, what you did, what you searched for, what was the what you find out. You don't have to make screenshots or whatever. Just send the link, and the people can then have a look at the processing at the breadcrumb navigation, edit the processing chain, and they can easily see, well, that's it. These were the steps, and here is say in step 2, that's the cause of what you see and what seems to be strange. So this is a very important feature. Another very important point is working with subcorpora. First of all, it's KonText supports examination of the actual contents of a corpus, and lets you zoom into the selected parts of it. It works like so. Say you are working with BNC or some other reference corpus, and you'd like to find out what's included in the fiction part, how many translations are there, what books are there that were translated from German in a given period, etc. And so this can be done by selecting parts of the corpus and really zooming into it. And if you get down to the document level, you'll then see the individual documents, and you can select that you want to work only with these 5 books and not the other ones, for instance. That's important because we feel that, and we always teach our students that they have to know their corpus, they have to know the data they are working with, and that's something that facilitates the getting to know the corpus. Then the subcorpus can be saved, of course. It gets a permanent ID, and its contents can be further refined and further narrowed and saved, possibly as another subcorpus. Finally, I'd like to point out that KonText supports not only monolingual corpora, but also parallel corpora and spoken corpora. Although the support for spoken corpora is really lightweight, it's not full-fledged support like Elan or other specialized tools can offer. But what KonText can do is to show you the visual representation of dialogues and indication of speaker turns and overlaps. And finally, KonText can display dependency syntaxes if a corpus is syntactically annotated. Although these syntactic querying for syntactic structures still require using CQL, so there is no facilitation in this respect yet. So just a few screenshots before I finish. So that's the tag builder, the tag building widget, where you see. In this case, it is on universal dependencies, and it is used on the corpus, on a parallel corpus intercop version 13 UD. It's English part, but it's used monolingually. So that's just searching a corpus, and you select a part of speech. Here it is a noun. Select that you need a plural. Click on insert, and what KonText will do, that it will create a sub part of the query that here corresponds to feeds equals to number plural and upos equals to noun. So that has been inserted by the tag builder, whereas the rest of the query is something that you have to round down yourself. And that's also an example of advanced query and of the syntax highlighting. The result looks like this, just quite standard concordance. Next to the number of hits that you can see in the upper left corner, there's also IPM, so the relative frequency, and ARF. ARF is average reduced frequency, and it is a frequency that takes into account also the dispersion. So there's also a dispersion measure included everywhere. The breadcrumb navigation is right above that. So there's a corpus, then the query, then the shuffle. That was the first operation that has been done on the result, and other subsequent operation would just extend the breadcrumb navigation line. And here is the example of a syntax tree that gets displayed when you click on in the left column, second left column. There is something that resembles a graph. So that's the syntactic tree of the result that you can see. So yeah, so that's it. I think I'm finished now. Two more slides. Sorry. That's the parallel concordance. When you take the corpus as a parallel corpus, so here it is English, German, intercorp, the same query, but with parallel display of the adjective followed by noun in subject position and its translation into German. And the last slide is the depiction of utterances and overlaps in a dialogue in a spoken corpus. So that's it. That was a quick overview of all the features, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Michal. That was excellent. A very excellent overview, and really given us a good feel for some of the differences between what online and desktop corpora do. Although, as you said at the beginning, I think that's an interesting topic for discussion, and we can investigate how whether some of these differences are starting to break down. So the way I think we can organise this now is that we'll have a panel discussion with all of the speakers, and so you've all got your video on, which is good. It's best if everybody remains muted, including the panelists, until you say something. We'll say the easiest way to pose a question would be to put it in the chat. The easiest way to organise things. But I also want to allow the panelists to speak to each other and ask each other questions, because there are clearly some areas where that would be useful, I think, that have come up already. I wanted to start off the discussion though with one topic which was raised by Laurence, which was about, I'd put it into the category of sustainability. You talked very interestingly about the advantages of the project leader being the corpus designer, and the advantages of it being a kind of a one-man show and you being in control of everything, and it was very easy to see the distinct advantages of that. But you also drew attention to a weakness, which is the dependence, the total dependence on you, which started me thinking about how would one deal with that problem, the risk of complete dependence. And it's a general problem, because the dependence might be on an individual or on an institution or a particular funding stream, and you can think of various ways of trying to mitigate those risks. I mean, one potential solution has already been raised, which is the open source question, because obviously one solution to that would be to make the code open source, then others could take it on. Although you pointed to problems with that at the moment, is there a solution whereby it could go open source if and when you stopped being able or willing to maintain the code and run the project?
Yeah, so there's a lot to unpack there. But first, in terms of the one-man show approach, it doesn't have to, of course, be one man. I think the key point I was making there is that the manager of the project knows the code. So if whether it's one person or a team, I'm sure Michal probably knows the code that's going into KonText, but even if he's not the primary developer right now. So it's a question about knowing the code so that you can respond to questions, you can respond to feature requests and so on. If you don't know the code, it can sometimes not be so easy to answer these more difficult questions. In terms of sustainability for AntConc, I've many times thought about making it open source. There's no real reason why I can't. It's not a monetary thing because AntConc's free anyway. It's more of, I suppose, a control, quality control aspect, and even more is if I make it open source, then I've got to take in requests and feature update, and all these other aspects that go with open source project management. And I would not expect many people to be actually submitting anything. So it would be a lot more work to manage an aspect of the coding, which I would expect wouldn't really have an impact on the development. But as you say, though, even if I died tomorrow, what would happen to AntConc? Would it just die as well? And so there is this need to put it somewhere. So I have actually given it to certain people so that if I did die, the code would be available. But it is something I've constantly thought about, and if I can hear a really convincing argument I should put it onto GitHub, I would definitely consider it. And if I had some people, who are really interested in collaborating and working together to develop it more, again, that would be the way to go, I think.
Thank you. That's very interesting. I mean, I wasn't necessarily thinking if you died tomorrow, perhaps if you decided to change, you wanted to become a chef or a tree surgeon.
Right. Yes. Yeah,
a more optimistic scenario. So would the other panelists like to comment on the question of strategies for sustainability?
Yeah, there's a raised hand here. I don't know if you can see it
from that.
Yeah. I just wanted to add to that, if I may. I think working together and finding ways we can share the work in a way that is beneficial for all the stakeholders. It's I think something that we can all discuss, and perhaps CLARIN can be instrumental in this way as well, because of the infrastructure that it offers and also the platform it offers for these types of debates. I think from my perspective, the openness, and when we are talking about open science as a sort of broad perspective, not only in terms of the code base, but in terms of the transparency, one of the words that Laurence also used fairly frequently in his work. And I think, the transparency in particular, obviously sustainability, but transparency in particular is at stake here. And if I want to check an equation for an association measure that a tool produces, I need to have access to it in some way. And currently I wouldn't be able to do that with AntConc. I would be able to do that with KonText. I would be able to do that with Lancsbox. So there are also implications for the users in terms of the transparency, which I also see from this perspective. And I really sort of welcome this debate about how we can move forward and also how to do this efficiently, because corpus linguistics is a very popular but still a sort of fairly small discipline, and we are moving from this sort of niche area to something probably potentially larger with a larger user base. And the question is, what sort of collaborations and what sort of team effort is required for this new status of corpus linguistics, if you wish. And I don't have an answer to that, but I think it's quite important to see this within the context of open science as well.
can I just respond to Vaclav about AntConc there with the statistics? If you follow the AntConc discussion group, you'll see that people often do ask that exact question, like what's the stat they're using for log likelihood? And I will just give it, for example, there. So documenting the procedures that you're using, absolutely essential. I think it's a slightly different discussion to open source. I'm sure there's a lot of tools which I think even Sketch Engine, for example, doesn't have open source for its system, but it will document very clearly what statistics are being used in the system. I think that's minimally that's what we need to do, and probably AntConc could be improved in its transparency of what stats it is using. But anybody could ask me, and I would just give them even the code for that, actually.
Yeah, Michal, did you want to add anything to this this discussion?
Yeah, perhaps just to remark that KonText is not a one-man show, but still there have never been very many developers, and Tomáš, the lead developer, is the key person here. But we are trying to so that's also the reason why Martin has also, Martin Zimandl, the second developer, has also joined the team, and so that it would not everything would not rely just on a single person. So now we are in a situation when KonText is not dependent on a single person, but it is dependent on the project or project funding of the infrastructure. Czech National Corpus that's funding basically the development of KonText. So, but that's that's not, I think that's unavoidable. It's always we always will have to react to the current situation. We can only try to minimize the risks and foresee the risks. But then, yeah, I think that's all we can do.
From the infrastructure point of view, if I may add, I see here two points of criticity, because on the one hand there is the support to the tool itself, which is must be maintained, but then all of you more or less described these ecosystems where you also, for instance, Laurence develops all of these tutorials, maintains this community. Then there's for instance, for LancsBox, there's also this synergy with the MOOC, and also for Michal, there's the case center. So in a way, there's a lot of work which goes beyond mere developing, polishing the code, etc. And I was wondering whether you have ideas about how infrastructures can help in that respect.
Well, I can respond for AntConc. So I have, as you know, my servers, and I manage them completely independently of everybody else, and including my own institution. So I have my own servers, and I have my own YouTube accounts, and so on. It's important for my users to know where to go. As I was saying in my talk, they need to be able to go on Google and search and get the link and be able to go there and be confident that the software is there and able to be downloaded. So any infrastructure, on top of what I have would require that stability in some sense. Changing links is going to be the worst thing ever for my users. So at the moment, I don't really see a need to improve my infrastructure. I think the download speeds are generally fine, and YouTube is an excellent support, infrastructure for launching YouTube tutorial videos and so on. So for example, CLARIN, I'm sure, has many excellent services and support systems, but they would have to be better. For example, better than YouTube for launching YouTube tutorials. They would have to be better than my server for stability and clarity and so on. That would be an interesting question if it was better. Something to discuss, perhaps.
Yeah, I mean, a short answer to that is that CLARIN puts its videos on YouTube. I think where the where these facilities exist, it's certainly sensible not to try to reproduce them and try to compete with platforms like that.
May I just add to that, because I mean, you know, YouTube is a sort of an example of a system that is extremely helpful in some countries, but not that helpful in other countries. I think China, for instance. So obviously, you know, we also might like to think about sort of the geographical impact of what we are doing here at Lancaster University. We are migrating the tutorial videos for Langsbox to systems that are also available in other countries as well. We are sort of eStream and sort of other alternatives to YouTube. Obviously, there's always an overhead to any type of decision you make, but I just wanted to point out the accessibility of some of the platforms in different parts of the world.
It's a great point, Vaclav. Yeah, I've always been concerned about that, and I get a lot of people asking, especially for example in China, asking for YouTube tutorials like moved over to Weibo and so on. And I think people have done that. I think on their own, but it's absolutely essential to consider the entire population of the world especially for tools like mine, where it is language agnostic. And I do have a lot of users in China and other places. Yeah, it's an excellent point.
Yes, I think that leaves the question of, you know, where for a language resources infrastructure, what kind of roles can it play? Because we don't want to reproduce YouTube and other video platforms. We don't want to reproduce GitHub. You know, that works perfectly well. You know, try and think of the things that we can do. So obviously one of them is the you know, things like the resource discovery guides, or you have user-focused support to try and help users to navigate a fragmented field and help them to find things, and to support them in using them. So that's more of the, you know, perhaps less technical. It's part of the sort of knowledge sharing infrastructure, as Francesca, as she called it. I think in terms of technical things, though, I think, you know, things to do with sustainability and interoperability have always been very important for CLARIN. So it's, you know, having for data sets, having repositories for them. With tools, you know, we're not quite so sure, because there are things like GitHub there. But in terms of interoperability as well, you know, we'd like to try and create an ecosystem where things can more easily be moved around and connected to each other. Now, obviously, there's a case with desktop tools that, you know, there's obviously a market for something, you know, self-contained that you download to your desktop and you do all your research there. I mean, that's fine. And perhaps for different purposes, you go to another tool, and perhaps you know, when you get to a more advanced stage, you move on to something else. But I'd be interested to know what people think about the possibilities for more interoperability. Is there a way, you know, if you're using a particular tool which doesn't have another piece of functionality, it's a problem for users if they have to go along and move to a completely different platform in order to, you know, go for one to do the n-grams and go to another one to do the word clouds, for example. Is there a solution? Are there ways we can, you know, move towards a solution for that type of problem?
Well, as I said in my, if I can go first, as I said in my talk, that I proposed a data format called MTSV with Stephanie Evert back in 2019, I think it was in the slide, and we thought carefully about what kind of format we would need to allow concordancing data, cluster data, collocate data, and all these different data, all these different results to be exported and imported into different systems. And that MTSV format, which is basically a plain text tabular format, could do the job. And I've been working, you know, I've incorporated that into AntConc 4, and it seems to be working well, I would say. You can create all these different tables within the MTSV format, or you could output a result as a SQLite file, and be able to open that and read that by pretty much any tool. So it is a very important problem. I actually just recently talked about that in my plenary at AACL about data interoperability. Even like a word list can be a problem, going from one system to another. especially if you want, for example, dispersion data included. A lot of word lists don't have dispersion data included at all, and then you can't use the word list. So it's something that we'd like to, we certainly should consider. I know Mike Scott has been interested in the MTSV format as well, but if other developers were interested to get on board with some kind of standard format, it would help a lot of systems, I think.
I think one thing I would point out from my perspective, and this is a very important initiative, and I've seen sort of announcement of that, and hoping that more people would come together and sort of work on that. But I think the sort of more general point in corpus linguistics in terms of the standards and standard measurements, I think we are sort of 19th century physics, where we are trying to define the units. Different tools, including AntConc, will use different tokenizers, and that will have direct implications to the data that you output. So, no matter how standard the format of the input or output is, there will be different assumptions in the individual tools. So, being able to be open about this, again, back to the issue of transparency and open science, and being able to see how to link the data together if we need to. One of the approaches that we've taken with LancsBox is that we allow users to plug in their own scripts. Currently, LancsBox Eggs implements R fully, the R statistical package. So when you have the data, you don't have to sort of migrate it to a different tool if you have a particular statistical procedure that you want to perform, but you can do it natively inside the tool and receive the results there. Because one of the things to remember is that transfer of data and the sort of low-level copy pasting data from one tool and another, as we know from research, is a sort of typical source of errors in even published writing. So copying from one Excel spreadsheet into another. So being mindful of that and sort of working perhaps together as a discipline, people who have stakes in different tools and different processes, I think. And again, I can see very, very important role of initiatives such as CLARIN to coordinate some of these things, and maybe sort of starting the debates about the standards that we have in our field.
Yes, thank you very much. They're very useful comments. We're actually running out of time now, Laurence, I'm afraid. So I think we might have to start kind of wrapping up. But I think there's some really useful and interesting things have come out there. I have to admit, I hadn't heard of MTSV before, so that's something that I suspect there's quite a lot of work we could do with looking into that further and promoting it. It looks like an excellent and very interesting initiative, as does the architecture of LancsBox, with being able to plug in new tools. I put in a category of for the tools for our spreadsheet of how how to classify them. So, is it flexible in terms of the tools that you can add and take away from it? And then I took it out because I said, no, nobody can do that. But I'm very pleased to see that LancsBox can do that now. But I'm afraid we will have to wrap up there in a moment. Francesca's got a couple of short announcements that she wants to make. But just before that, I thank very much all of our participants and all of our speakers. Thank you for what's been, for me, certainly an excellent and very interesting event. Thank you, and let's let the conversation continue. Francesca.
Yeah, indeed, and I think that also I wanted to underline that CLARIN can also offer other platforms for continuing this discussion, definitely in terms of how to integrate the tools and our resources, for instance, better with each other, maybe what we can do to make our formats for our corpora more interoperable for your tools. So this is definitely just the beginning. And indeed, to all the participants, I would like to encourage you, I put all the links in the chat to join our newsflash, to stay updated with what we are doing, to check out for other events and for other support opportunities. And in terms of virtual events, there will be another CLARIN Café in November dedicated to legal issues, which is still to be announced. But before that, we have our CLARIN conference, which is face-to-face in Prague by invitation, but can also be attended virtually. And to do that, you just have to register. And to stay in touch also with our events, you can also follow us on Twitter. So yeah, let's continue this discussion, which was really very, very interesting. And thanks to you all for participating and to our speakers.